Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Groppo. I'm one of the registered dietitians at Stanford Healthcare. I'm also one of the diabetes educators at Stanford Healthcare. And so today I really wanted to talk about how do we use garden fresh vegetables. We have a three-part series. So we're going to talk today about tomatoes. We're going to talk next week about cucumbers and zucchinis. We're going to have a guest with Dr. Chen is going to pop in and talk to us about cucumbers and get to sample some of the recipes. I always feel like I wish I could influence the smell through your computer or however you're watching this, because to me, I feel like the smell in the kitchen, getting to taste the food is part of the whole experience. So we do miss out on that virtually when you all can't kind of be here. So hopefully Julie, Dr. Chen can capture that and describe it for you all next time. So really thinking about, I wanted to start with a story. So when I was growing up, my mom really loved to garden. And for every Mother's Day, she'd always ask all of us kids, I have two older brothers, if we could help her plant her garden. And so begrudgingly, we always did. It was always warm, and there was always a lot of digging, a lot of dirt, and a lot of directions from my mom. But really, as I've gotten older, she's really helped impart that joy of growing things that you can eat into my own life. And that's something I really love to share with my own family as well. So I kind of just wanted to let you know about that story, and hopefully you all kind of can think about things you might want to grow, or all these things you can get in the grocery store. You can also get at farmers markets if you like to peruse those. And oftentimes when we buy things in the summertime, they're a little bit less expensive because they're very seasonal. Especially where we live, there is so many local farms and produce that has a lot of abundance. So hopefully you can get your hands on some tomatoes and try these different recipes. So with my mom wanting to always plant a garden, we oftentimes would have excess things like tomatoes. So normally we would plant a big plant, like a beefsteak type of tomato, and some kind of sun golds or something small like a cherry tomato. So I'm going to highlight different recipes for all of these different things. And then I think we'll also put the recipes in the chat and send them out to you all so you can have them. So my very first recipe that I want to get started on is something that I've grown up eating. I make all the time. It's perfect for a hot day. I don't know where you're all zooming in from, but here in Palo Alto, Sunnyvale area, it's super hot. So this recipe doesn't require any heating. It just requires chopping and some prep, and then it just kind of sits, marinates, and then it's ready to go. So without further ado, I just wanted to do a little bit of prep. Let me grab a cutting board as well. And then if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them as we go. So with the magic of trying to do kind of cooking demos, I have prepared some of the stuff already. So I prepared two large kind of beefsteak tomatoes from my garden, a yellowish one, it's called a persimmon tomato, and then just a normal kind of red one. So two tomatoes made all of this. I just diced it. So in this recipe, it's very simple and very adaptable. So thinking about adding in some basil. So I have about 5 large leaves of basil. If you grow basil at home, you can always, if there are smaller leaves, you can take maybe like 8 or 9 leaves. And I just take these, kind of roll them up like that, and then keep my fingers out of the way and just kind of chop. So I get these kind of nice, fine ribbons of basil. And so as I'm going, it's always important too to try to use sharp knives, keep those fingers out of the way. I always laugh because before I do a cooking demo, I always tell myself, Leah, make sure you don't get too excited and you still remember that your fingers need to stay away from the knife. I always try to tell myself that because I always feel like it's such a wonderful opportunity that people give us when we do cooking demos. We have lots of them on the Health Library website that all of the dietitians have done at Stanford Healthcare. So we always feel like it's such an opportunity that you come into our kitchens, you get to know us a little bit more personally, and get to learn some of our favorite family recipes. So with that excitement, I always remind myself, Leah, don't slice your fingers. So I just take the basil and I kind of add it in fresh. So as you can see, it's getting lots of really nice colors. I add some minced garlic. So I normally just kind of take the garlic clove, smash it, and then mince it. Is a great option. Here's a garlic clove. I already prepped some of it, but I also wanted to show you what that looks like. So you just take the garlic clove, and I take my knife right here, put it down, and smash it. And this helps you peel garlic really easily, because sometimes it's hard to kind of peel and get all that garlic off. And we definitely will be sharing the recipes. We actually, I think we're going to be sharing them in the chat, and then we can also send them out as well after. So now I've very quickly, while reading a chat message, peeled the garlic. Didn't take too much brain power. And then I just normally take that little kind of bottom peel off because I don't like the way that tastes. And then I just kind of dice down one side, and then to mince, I chop the other way. And then if you want, you can always make it more fine. It's up to you. I also, one of my favorite tools in the kitchen is a garlic press. I think they're maybe like $10, but you can have it for a lifetime. You can just put garlic in the press with the garlic peel or without, and press it right through and use it right away. And so that's a really easy way also to kind of prepare garlic. In all these recipes, they kind of have a similar theme. These are things that I really enjoy eating, but I'll talk about different ways to adapt each recipe based on your taste. Because I'm a firm believer that recipes are sort of loose maps. They're not things that we have to follow to a T. If we're driving down a road of a recipe road, and if we take a left turn instead of a right turn, oftentimes the result will still be super delicious. And so I feel like food should just be a way that we can also think about our creativity and what we like. So if the things I put in the recipes you don't like, you can sub out and think about how you want to kind of adapt that as well. So this garlic looks great to me. I'm going to just kind of add it to this bowl. I like a lot of garlic. Kind of fresh garlic makes things a little bit spicy. If you don't like things with that kind of extra garlic flavor, or you plan to go hang out with lots of friends who haven't been enjoying lots of garlic and you don't want your breath to smell, you can always kind of put it in a little bit of olive oil and put it in the microwave. For 30 seconds, it kind of cooks it and dulls the flavor a little bit, and it doesn't affect your breath as much either. So, or you can invite all those friends over and have them all eat garlic with you, and then nobody will notice. Okay, so here we are. We have tomatoes, basil, garlic. With this kind of quick tomato sauce, I add some balsamic vinegar. If you have a lot of time, you can always reduce the balsamic vinegar. So put it on the stove, heat it on low heat for a while until it gets really thick and syrupy. That's always a flavor add that you can do. I just have regular, normal balsamic vinegar, a tablespoon of it. And then I add a tablespoon of olive oil as well. I've made this without any olive oil. So if for some reason you want to have a really lower fat option, no fat option, you can omit the olive oil. If you want to have it, I think it adds like an extra delicious flavor. So I like to put it in. And then I just have a little bit of salt and pepper that I'll just kind of add at the very end. So thinking about this, in the first couple minutes, we've already made our very first recipe. So this is all it is. It's actually just a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, a tablespoon of olive oil, garlic, basil, and tomatoes, and salt and pepper to taste. It sounds super simple. It's something that I guess my mom said there used to be a magazine that was called Red House or something a long time ago, and she literally cut out the magazine clipping for this recipe, and we've kind of used it ever since. The ratios have changed. In their recipe, they actually put parsley. So parsley is also a great option. So if you don't have basil, or you do have basil and you just want to add parsley, you can add parsley for more green. And so super simple. And I think maybe some people are saying, why am I coming and listening to this thing that's so easy? Well, I also want to talk to you about what you can do with this very simple tomato sauce, like all the things that you can kind of pair with it. So now that we have this created, when I'm at home, I will make this a big batch, but this is just 2 tomatoes. And I will also grill or bake salmon. And then after I'm done, I've seasoned this with granulated garlic, granulated onion, some pepper. And then I'll take this tomato mixture and I'll just, before I serve it, I'll pop a whole bunch of that over. So then we just have this kind of salmon with a whole bunch of fresh tomatoes on top. If I have things like arugula, a really peppery, bright, fun, leaf type thing, I'll add arugula all over it, or on a bed of arugula, and put this tomato over with the salmon, and it presents really beautifully. It tastes delicious, and it's a great way to use lots of local and fresh seasonal tomatoes, and then also to kind of get some extra seafood into your diet, because I really think that having food that we want to eat is paramount, right? If we think about healthy eating, sometimes when I teach class, people, I always say, what does a healthy meal plan look like? Or what does a healthy meal look like? And people often will say, well, definitely not delicious. So I think with this quick series, I really want to hopefully refute that concept that delicious food is not going to be healthy and vice versa. I want to really think about how we can infuse lots of flavors and make things super delicious and nourishing for our body together, because we don't really want to sit and eat foods that we don't like to eat, but we feel are healthy, right? We want the best of both worlds. And I think in this case, we can get them. Okay, so here's our salmon with tomato. I also grabbed a can of garbanzo beans or chickpeas, and I rinsed and drained them. Put it in a bowl. You can just grab the tomato mixture, pop it on, and then mix it together. And then you have like a super great fresh salad that you can bring to a potluck. Sometimes with this, I'll also add more extra basil, or I'll add maybe some feta. I also found in the store some little mozzarella balls that I thought would also be great. I would add that maybe in as well. So really trying to think about foods that we enjoy eating and how we can kind of pair them all together. But this is something that, like if someone invited me to a potluck and asked for a side, I would bring something maybe fresh mozzarella to give it some kind of creamy texture, garbanzo beans, and then tomato salad. If you wanted to add more of kind of like a punch, you can also add like red wine vinegar to this, a little more garlic. Make sure, see all this tomato juice in there? Make sure you get that extra juice into the salad and let it kind of sit. It would be a really super delicious option. If you take the cheese balls out, then you're at a plant-based kind of meal. And then if you want to add the cheese in, that's also fine. I feel like cheese sometimes adds extra fun flavor, so I like to kind of incorporate and add it. I have one more sort of idea, actually 2 more ideas on how to kind of adapt and think about this super easy salad. So I also kind of just grilled a whole bunch of shrimp. So sometimes I'll just take this and toss it in a big bowl with like grilled shrimp or grilled tofu. Sometimes I'll just pan fry tofu, marinate it in some balsamic vinegar, give it a lot of extra flavor, some garlic, and then add it in as a protein instead of shrimp. So this is really super adaptable. If you think about just the time in your kitchen, it takes maybe 5 minutes. And then if you compare it with all these different proteins into a lot of different meals and different sides, And that kind of cuts down on your time in the kitchen. It makes things easier. I'm always all for easy. I'm also always for less dishes. So I don't really prefer to do dishes. So if I can make one thing and enhance the flavor of multiple different dishes, that's a huge win in my book. So we also have this, and then I did have one final sort of thought. So one of my kind of great either lunches or snacks, depending on my hunger level and the portion, I'll actually take cottage cheese in a bowl, and I will add tomato and basil and garlic on top as kind of like a heavy snack or even like a meal. Sometimes I'll pack this in multiple kind of Tupperwares for work, and depending on my hunger level, I might have that as a lunch or have it as something like a heavy snack before I come home, so I don't walk in the door super ravenous, because I feel like most of us know when you walk in the door after work and you're really hungry, oftentimes the choices you hope to make aren't always the choices that you make. Okay, so another way. So if we think about summary, so we did the tomato with salmon, grilled salmon. We did it with shrimp, cottage cheese, and then can't forget the garbanzo beans. And then also, I mean, one of my favorites, we also just toss it over pasta. Or in the recipe that my mom found from the magazine cutout, it was actually tortellini, specifically meat-filled tortellini, which seems kind of random, but yeah, it was just little tortellini, so a great sauce to go on those as well. You wanted to have some pasta with it, or like it's almost like a bruschetta recipe. I mean, it probably is basically has all the same things, so you could just put it on bread too. If I were to do that, I would actually dice the tomatoes more finely, because I think that the bigger chunks don't go as well on like a toast. They have more slippage. They don't sit as nicely. So here is our first recipe. We threw it onto 4 different proteins. You could also pair it with carbs and make it into different meals. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so our next thing that, I also wanted to say, the base of that, if you wanted to make like a Pico de Gallo, you could add like a jalapeno and add like a lime, squirt of lime and some cilantro with just the tomato base. And then basically you are, and then basically you're almost at a Pico de Gallo. I would also omit the basil. So somebody asked if I can rephrase how not to have bad breath. So I actually just take some minced garlic, put it in just a little bit of oil just to cover it in a microwave safe bowl. You can do it on stove too if you want. And then you can just microwave it for maybe like 30 seconds. You don't want it to burn, but you just want it to kind of sizzle a little bit, kind of cooks it down and makes the garlic flavor not as pungent. Okay, let's keep moving. Does anyone have any questions about our tomato sauce? This is literally our go-to. So for our birthdays, we always get to ask what we want, and this is all the summer birthdays. We have a lot of them in my family. They always ask for this tomato sauce with different pairings. And so it's really definitely a family favorite. Reminds me of my childhood, but I feel like it's well worth sharing because it's really tasty and very easy. I think also the more we can make cooking really quick and easy, I think is always the better option as well. Okay, so next we're gonna think about this tomato sauce that I love to make. It's kind of very similar to what we just did, but it's a cooked version. So I'll sometimes make this after dinner, maybe at 9 or 10 p.m. when the house is open, things are cooling off, not in the heat of the day, because that just makes things so much harder. It's not very fun to cook in a hot kitchen. So how I do this recipe is, here's my cutting board again. And since I haven't prepared with any raw meat or anything, I'm just going to reuse my knife and my cutting board. Sometimes when you grow tomatoes, they can get these funny little bottoms, like little sides, like this, sometimes like a big kind of like round thing on the bottom. Oftentimes it's actually just from irregular watering, or when the flower was being pollinated, maybe something happened and the tomato is gonna form a little bit funky, which is totally fine. I've already washed these. So those kind of harder, weird parts on the bottom, I don't really like the way that they taste. I feel like they give a funny texture. So I normally cut them off if possible, but it also depends on how tired I am. If I'm really tired, then I don't cut it off, because I feel like cooking is always super flexible, which is one of the reasons why I love it. When I was in college, I loved to bake. They actually had this baking competition in our dorm room, which is so funny. It was this room full of 4 guys, and they said they wanted to have a baking competition. And then whoever won would get this like gift card to a restaurant downtown that they somehow got donated. But really, I think it was just their way of getting like 50 different desserts to come to their door, which definitely happened. But I feel like back in my high school days, I was big into making cakes and cookies, and I still like to bake, but I really have found a great joy of cooking, because baking, you have to be fairly precise. And I'm always that person who's like, oh, really, 2 cups of sugar? Let's try for 1. So sometimes things don't turn out well. Or how do we add beans to this brownie? So sometimes my baked goods as being myself don't always turn out as well now. But with cooking, the kind of moral of this story, you can do so many things. Things don't have to be the right ratio. Things don't have to like rise at the right amount, have the right amount of yeast or flour. It's really just what your taste is. So I love that flexibility with cooking. It's almost like it's like an art, I think, or at least it's my way of thinking about art, because like in my life, I am not really an artist at all, but with cooking, I feel like it's something that we can kind of share with people and create something beautiful that's tasty and hopefully enjoyable. So I think if you don't, if you want to try the recipes, I hope so, but even so, the time thinking about how you can spark joy in your own kitchen and think about the things you'd want to make. And so for you, if you're not sure what tomato recipes you want and you don't like basil and maybe you don't like garlic, think about the flavors that you do like. Do you like oregano? Do you like cilantro? Do you like lime or lemon? Like it's some type of acid, that all goes great as well. So just really making things more appealing to whatever you like. As we're talking, I'm just getting so excited about cooking and sharing cooking and the way that I like to cook, that I realized for this recipe, I normally just kind of cube the tomatoes really, really large like this, because I also try to do as little as possible in the kitchen sometimes, just to make things a little bit easier. Because this is all going to go into a pan and be cooked down. So it doesn't need sort of that nicer chop that the other tomato sauce needed. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we're gonna try to do a different camera on here as well. So this is what the tomatoes look like. And then we're going to walk over here. So see, it's kind of sizzling. We're actually gonna cook these down for maybe like 30 minutes or so. So I wanted to kind of show you what that on the stove kind of looked like, just so that you could see. So I'll kind of add those. Sometimes I'll add in some more garlic and onions and saute that a little bit first to kind of get that cooked down. I found with this recipe, so that would be my preference normally. I realized I didn't do it in that way, but you can also add the garlic and the onions as it's cooking, like right now, which I actually am going to go and grab. And toss it together. because it will cook down. It cooks for so long that it really can be something that you can kind of let sit on like low medium and cook for a while. But it does actually tend to really heat up your house. So I tend to like to try to do that one a little bit later. So this is something that the longer you cook it, the more caramelized it will get. And with fresh tomatoes, especially ones that are picked closer to their ripeness and more local, you'll really get a lot of that caramelization and sugar. So sometimes I'll make this sauce and people will say, did you add sugar to your sauce? And the answer is always a resounding no. I don't add any sugar or honey or anything to the sauce. Sometimes some balsamic vinegar, but basically it's just the tomatoes kind of giving out their own special flavor, which I think can be something that's really helpful and definitely very, very delicious. And so with this sauce, you can add all different things. You can add basil, you can add oregano, Italian seasoning, more garlic, onions, and then just kind of let that cook down and let all the water come out, and you'll kind of get this thicker, almost like a tomato paste. And sometimes you can blend it and make it into a smooth sauce, or you can keep it with some skins and a little bit chunky. Both are great options. So that's kind of our second recipe. Very similar ingredients, but just cooked in a hot way. It definitely tastes really different. And so I think even if we were to have like a dinner party together, you could do the fresh tomato sauce on like a protein, and then you could do this kind of cooked down, more caramelized sauce on like a pasta or tortellini, or on bread if you wanted to have carbs, or like in a pasta salad, something like that. And you could throw that onto your into your meal, and people would not think you're duplicating because the flavors do end up tasting different. Does anyone have any questions? That one's actually just gonna kind of hang out and cook for a while. So if there are any kind of questions right now, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, somebody's asking if I ever use a fully food mill to remove the seeds. So you can get food mills, and so it's like this kind of metal thing. It has like a almost like a colander. You put the tomatoes and sort of basically separate the juice from the seeds and the pulp. I don't, and the only reason for that is because I feel like it's more work. And I like the seeds and the skins in tomatoes. So a tomato has maybe like 1.5-ish grams of fiber per tomato, maybe 2, depending on the size. And most of that fiber comes from insoluble fiber, like skin-based fiber. So tomatoes aren't super high in soluble fiber. So I try to keep those skins in when possible. And somebody's saying there are lots of varieties of tomatoes, and which kind of varieties do I like for sauces? So I think it just depends. So the big thing that matters with tomatoes, if you decide to get into canning, which I have not gotten into canning because I'm worried about the food safety of it, you do need specific tomatoes because you need the acid to be high enough to keep them safe at room temperature after you can them. For all these recipes, every year I grow different tomatoes. So sometimes I'm growing like yellow ones or purple tomatoes. I have some blueberry tomatoes right now, some strawberry looking tomatoes, persimmon tomatoes. They all work well in these sauces. So as long as you're not trying to can or do something that really matters for the acidity level of the tomato, you can go with any tomato. So for me, when I take my daughter to the grocery store, if we're trying to find a new fruit or veggie, I always say, which one do you think is interesting? We just walk around and try to find different ones. Sometimes she'll pick a tomato that maybe looks different than we haven't grown. I think the other week she chose one that was green and it had like stripes on it. So we don't have any green tomatoes. And so we cooked with that. So I think the tomatoes for these sauce recipes in particular are not picky. You can choose any type of tomato. I would say like Roma tomatoes that come from really far distances are often ripening kind of as they go, and they have less robust flavor. They would be really great in the sauce option, but they would be not as great in the first fresh tomato sauce, because that one really is relying on a lot of delicious tomato flavor. So you want those to be like the ones on the vines you can buy in the store, or like the small cherry tomatoes have really good flavor. They even have new ones in the store I've seen called flavor bombs. They're pretty delicious as well. But I also go for whatever is on sale, and it would definitely work for these recipes. Are there any other questions? Like, okay, great. And then I'm going to just give this a quick stir. It's already starting to cook down. And then we'll get started on our last recipe. Does anyone have any questions before we kind of move to the last one of the three? And then I have a bonus idea. Okay, great. So the last recipe that I want to think about, it is something that I also really love to do with different proteins. Like I like to do it with shrimp, stuff like that. But it also stands really well on its own. Create the space to look a little bit cleaner and nicer. So we can focus on this. Okay, great. So this recipe actually has smaller tomatoes, different varieties of cherry tomatoes. So I was laughing because I actually went away on vacation for a week, and I asked someone to water my garden, and unfortunately they weren't able to water it as often as I really had hoped that they could. And so my tomatoes were a little bit sadder than I had thought they would be when I came back. So these ones I actually just bought from the grocery store. It was like a mixed variety of tomatoes. So we can definitely get them from the store as well. So these are tomatoes, and then they have a tablespoon of olive oil in them. I have the 3 cloves of garlic for this, and a big roasting pan. This one I'm going to use my garlic press. So this one I actually just take the whole clove in and press it. I feel like in cooking demos, when we're trying to get multiple things, I try to prep a lot, but there's always something on the stove, and I'm always hoping that I don't forget it and burn or something. But I just checked our tomatoes, and they're looking like they're getting caramelized and delicious and breaking down. So I think we're good. Okay, so I would just take the 3 cloves and press them. And I think like the great idea too is if you don't like tomato skins or anything like that, you can always use bigger tomatoes, and you can boil them and peel the skin if maybe they irritate your gut or something like that. I think that's fine. And then we have some more basil, very similar. Toss this and then put it in our baking dish. And then for this one, I actually just grabbed some feta. And so I am always very curious in my brain because I know measurements from baking, like cups, half a cups, quarter cups, really well in my brain, what that looks like. When we talk about carbohydrate counting, we talk about as prepared, typically in like cups or half cup portions, 1/3 cup portions. But when I'm thinking about different things in grams, my brain and ounces is not as great at realizing like what 1 gram or 1 ounce of something is, like 1 ounce of cheese, things like that. So I actually measured out. So 1 ounce of feta cheese, this is the 1 ounce of feta cheese. And when I think about feta in particular, I always try to think about sodium content. So feta has a very strong flavor. It's really delicious. It goes in great in lots of different things. I think pairs super great with tomatoes, but it does come with a big hefty punch of sodium, salt. And so for this 1 ounce of feta, it was 210 milligrams of sodium, which depending on your portion is which is totally fine. We think a low sodium food is like around 140 milligrams of sodium. But in our day, maybe we're consuming 2,300 milligrams of sodium. So if we were to add this into here, our 1 ounce, I think in the one I prepared in my oven already, I actually did like 2 ounces. And I also popped in more tomatoes, but I was running lower on the tomato option. But I just kind of like mix it all around. And this one I only add pepper to. I don't add any salt because we already going to get that salt pop from the feta. So when we're thinking about getting flavors from things like cheeses, feta, things like that, or textures, we can think about reducing things that we add later. So in this instance, because there is already a pop of sodium or salt, I'm not going to add salt, but add more garlic. I add 3 cloves of garlic to this recipe. So trying to kind of balance flavors. Adding things like some vinegars or lemon zest is also a great way to sort of get around adding lots of extra salt to different things. I always laugh when I watch cooking shows, which I love to do. It's always like salt at this step, salt at that step, salt at this step. So thinking about ways that we can maybe reduce the times that we add salt, maybe just at the end, or add things that have salt as we go. So this is the recipe. I cook it at 375 for maybe like 30 minutes, 35 minutes until the tomatoes kind of pop open and get softer. Let me go grab that out of the oven. So I prepped one a little bit earlier at my lunch break. So I wanted you all to sort of see what it could look like. So I cooked it a while ago, and then it was actually not too hot. And then I just let it sit in a warm oven. I also love that all these recipes are so flexible. So if we think about this, we have our feta and our tomato. It's kind of, all the little tomatoes have kind of popped and they have like little wrinkly skin, and they're reduced. So they're going to be super delicious and very flavorful. Sometimes at the very end, I might add some fresh, like extra green basil or some parsley, something like that, just to give it like an extra pop of flavor. And so this is something like if you eat chicken or grilled chicken, things like that, or salmon, whatever you want, I would put this actually on top of it as well. I think that's a great addition. Sometimes I'll take this with the feta and I'll actually cook the shrimp in this dish. So the shrimp are cooking in the tomato, in the feta, and that's like a really delicious meal. That I think I learned about that recipe from, I think, Simply Recipes from my sister-in-law. She actually brought it over one time to a family potluck, and like, this is delicious. I need to learn how you make this. And so she shared the recipe with me. But with all these, they're kind of what you have on hand can be helpful. Like in this recipe, sometimes if I have lots of extra zucchini, I'll throw in grilled zucchini and make it even larger and a bigger sort of option. So it's definitely very variable. Okay, let me go try to add my camera again. So I'm gonna switch on the other camera, and then we're gonna switch it over. We're getting a little toasty, a little bit more burnt. So I'm hoping not to do, but see how this is kind of cooking down. So that's kind of what we're looking for in the caramelization. Got a little toasty on the side because I'm not watching it. I can also turn the heat down a little bit. But trying to think about kind of reducing that and cooking it until all the water goes away is a great kind of option. And so if it's getting a little bit browner than you wanted on the corners, you can always add like, turn down the heat and then add like maybe a little bit of water. And then the flavor, it doesn't actually get that bitter because the tomato flavor is so strong. So it also works out. I feel like in the kitchen, I've kind of done every blender possible, and oftentimes with cooking, things always, they can work out okay. Sometimes they just look a little bit different, but we all need kind of like our dear friends and our family that will still eat the food that we make, or eat it ourselves, bring it for lunch. So this is the kind of final recipe that I really wanted to highlight. Just cherry tomatoes. I grabbed these at the store. I think they were on sale for $2 for a really large one. And then I grabbed some feta, some basil, some garlic, and a little bit olive oil, no salt, just some pepper, and then I roasted it for 30 minutes. And it's also like a great thing to kind of add and top on things. And also really good to just even eat. Like sometimes for breakfast, I'll make fancy toasts, and I'll do like a toast with some ricotta cheese and some tomato mixture on it, or straight tomato, or I'll make some scrambled eggs and I'll top it with one of these different sauces. So I think they do give you a lot of bang for your buck in the sense of time, because you can make them and then flavor your dishes for the rest of the week, which I think is really helpful, because we do definitely want to be eating delicious food, not bland food. So there's one extra thing that I wanted to kind of think about using is when I was growing up, we always asked for popsicles. And my mom would make juice popsicles, but we always wanted, like, I think the Otter Pops or something. And she didn't buy them as often. But what we would do is, as I was growing up, we would all pick tomatoes from the cherry tomato branches. And my mom would actually freeze them on a tray, like a cooking tray, maybe with wax paper, maybe not, after she washed them, something like this. And then from that, these ones are actually already frozen. We would actually eat these almost like little popsicles. It sounds silly, but as a kid, actually, we really enjoyed having them, and we would even ask for them. And they're a lot of fun, especially if they're really ripe in the prime of summer. And if you let it defrost a little bit like it is now, it has like a great, it's almost like a tomato slushy sort of, but they have a lot of really interesting and unique flavors. So that's kind of like a bonus thing that we always did when I was growing up that I wanted to share with you all. Sometimes cooking and eating fruits, well, technically tomatoes are fruits, but I consider them more vegetables. Doesn't have to be hard to get them in your day. It can be easy. You can freeze some, pop them in for snacks. You can make some sauces, add them into different foods you want to eat. So there's a lot of ways to kind of think about ways to get in these extra veggies, fruit, produce into your day. And I'm a huge fan. I feel like this year, my big conversation with many people is, how do we get more fresh fruits and veggies into our diet? How do we get more fiber, more plants into our diet for our health? And so hopefully this is something that has been helpful for you all to just kind of think about in your brain, how maybe you could add more tomatoes into your week and with your family or yourself. And then next time we're going to talk about cucumbers. Cucumbers are one of my favorite things to eat. I love them. I feel like they're so delicious. I actually was talking with someone the other day and they're like, oh, I don't really like cucumbers. Sometimes they taste bitter. It's like there's so many varieties of cucumbers, and some have more propensity to be bitter and some have less. I am notorious for growing bitter cucumbers, actually, because when cucumber plants are stressed, sometimes they end up being bitter from irregular watering, different heat and stuff like that. But this year I actually have some unbitter cucumbers. So we'll get to sample that with Dr. Chen next week. And then after that, we're gonna do one of my very favorite garden veggies, which is zucchini. I have a lot of them right now, actually. So when I was gone on the trip, they weren't picked. So I also have these like crazy enormous zucchinis as well that I think might end up going into some zucchini bread or something like that. So those are the different recipes I wanted to highlight. I'm gonna actually take a quick peek and see how, yeah, it's still not totally cooked down. Sometimes it does take 30 minutes to really cook that recipe down. In the recipes that I'm providing, there's like an example of it like halfway being cooked down. So it's still a little watery. I would finish it a little bit more, but there's that in the recipes as well. Does anyone have any questions before we finish this first part of the series? Oh, great. So somebody's asking, is there any nutrition loss when you cook the tomatoes versus eating them raw? So tomatoes are really interesting. One of the main plant chemicals, phytochemicals found in tomatoes is called lycopene. And lycopene has been shown to be really good for your heart and heart health. Lycopene is more available to your body when cooked. so more bioavailable when cooked. So that's why like this is a great option. So you could eat it raw, maybe less lycopene is going to be absorbed. You can cook it, maybe more lycopene, but you don't only have to have cooked tomatoes. You can have a variety, because your body does get different benefits from different things. For example, tomatoes are also high in vitamin C and potassium, and sometimes with cooking that can kind of reduce that a little bit as well. So you get benefit from raw and cooked. So you can try any of these different recipes. And then somebody is asking if the recipes were missed. The recipes are in the chat, and I think they're maybe at the very beginning of the start of our talk. So you should be able to find those, and we'll link them to the recording as well. And so, oh, someone said that she can't wait to try with her homegrown tomatoes. I also think it's just so fun to grow your own food. And tomatoes and gardening is so funny. I think that it's always good to do things that keep you humble in life. At least I find that for myself. And gardening is definitely one of them. Sometimes like years I'll have like what I call bumper crop, and I'm like, man, I'm nailing this garden thing. And then other years I'll get like one tomato, and my mom will have like thousands. And so I just think that gardening is just a fun thing to have to try. And you can even buy a seed packet for $2 and get a little pot like this size and put some tomato seeds in it, and whichever ones look the happiest, you can let those grow and like snip off the tops of the other one and just let the one grow in the pot. And you can get cherry tomatoes. Tomatoes are interesting though, because there's determinate tomatoes and indeterminate tomatoes. And so some grow and give you fruit all at once, and some grow really large and give you fruit for a longer period of time. So you kind of want to just see which one you have. So if you have a small space, you want to have a tomato that grows a smaller plant and still gives off fruit. But if you have a big space, you can get sort of a bigger indeterminate tomato that will climb over trellises and really take on its own in your garden. So depending, I feel like tomatoes are great because they can be so versatile on how you grow them too. And somebody's asking, yep, all of the talks will be recorded and posted on the Health Library. So you can kind of go back and think about how you want to add tomatoes into your day. And then I feel like I have answered all of the questions that I see. So if there aren't any other questions, I think we'll end here. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen and hearing about my family recipes. It just makes my heart so happy to be able to share this and this kind of love. I really, really wish there was a Zoom button where I could just like infuse all the smell into everyone else's home, because tomatoes smell so delicious. Garlic, onions, basil, it's really great smelling. So I wish I could do that, but I can't. So with that, I will see you all hopefully next week. And we'll get back to some more cooking. Thank you all. Bye.